You won't believe what just happened on The View. Mel Gibson, the legendary action star and director, left Whoopi Goldberg speechless on live TV, shocking the entire audience. The episode began like any other, with bright lights, loud applause, and familiar smiles from Whoopi, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin. But this wasn't just another interview. It was clear they had planned to corner Mel. Whoopi kicked things off with her usual flair, welcoming him as Hollywood star, talented director, and the most controversial man right now. Her words were polite, but her eyes hinted at something else. Mel stepped onto the stage with absolute confidence, dressed in a sharp black suit, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room before sitting down with a subtle, knowing smile. And then it all unfolded. The battle began. The View wasn't just a talk show today. It had turned into a battlefield. Before diving into the story, drop a comment on where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button so you never miss the latest stories. The atmosphere in the studio was electric, the audience leaning forward, whispers rippling under the bright lights. Mel Gibson sat with sharp focus, his gaze locked on Whoopi Goldberg, who had shed her polite facade, eyes sharp and unyielding. The camera zoomed in, capturing every raised brow and steely glance. Joy Behar smirked faintly, eyes glinting with anticipation, while Sunny Hostin gripped her pen like a weapon, ready to strike. The stage was set, and the first shot was about to be fired. Goldberg leaned in, her voice smooth but edged with challenge. All right, Mel, let's talk about the tax policy. You're backing Trump on a 100% tariff on foreign films. Do you really think that'll save Hollywood? Or is it just a way to choke global creativity? The question landed like a punch, the audience buzzing, some nodding along with her skepticism. Gibson didn't flinch. He sat comfortably, hands resting on the chair, but his eyes burned with conviction. American jobs? Mel replied firmly. Hollywood supports over 2 million people, from lighting crews to editors to set designers. When studios move production to countries with cheap labor, those jobs disappear. Just last year, we lost 30,000 union jobs to overseas filming. Tariffs create a level playing field. His voice was steady, each word sharp and deliberate, slicing. Through the tense studio air, the audience murmured, a few exchanging surprised glances. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, unfazed. But you're a filmmaker, Mel. You know art thrives on collaboration, not barriers. Tariffs will drive up costs, hurt independent producers, and limit choices for audiences. You call that good for creativity? Her tone dripped with sarcasm, as if dismissing his argument as outdated. Gibson responded with a slight smile, eyes glinting with defiance. Collaboration doesn't mean exploitation. Independent producers are struggling because big studios flood the market with cheap foreign films. Tariffs force studios to invest here in American talent. Last year, 70% of major studios' budgets went overseas. If we keep that money in the US, we can create thousands of new jobs, from sound stages to post-production. He paused, his gaze sweeping the audience, inviting them to reflect. Scattered applause broke out, and a few heads nodded in agreement. Joy Behar jumped in, her tone mocking, ready to challenge him further. Turn Hollywood into a museum, Mel? The world's globalized, Joy shot back. Gibson turned to face her, gaze steady. Globalization doesn't mean sacrificing American workers, Joy. I've filmed in Australia, Ireland, Mexico. I know the value of international collaboration, but when studios choose profits over people, we have to draw a line. Tariffs are that line. he said, voice firm and unyielding. His response cut through the tension, leaving Behar momentarily speechless. Her eyes flickered away, and Goldberg seized the moment, her tone sharpening. But what about the audience, Mel? They want great movies. They don't care where they're filmed. Tariffs will drive up ticket prices, hurting regular viewers. You think they'll thank you for that? Her question tugged at emotions, stirring murmurs from the crowd. Gibson tilted his head, eyes locked on Goldberg. Audiences deserve quality films, and that starts with fair pay for the people who make them. Ticket prices go up a few cents to save thousands of jobs. I think they'll understand. Besides, tariffs don't raise ticket prices. They force studios to cut their sky-high profits. Last year, the CEOs of the top 3 studios pocketed over $200 million, while set workers scrape by on temp contracts. Who's really hurting the audience, Whoopi? His words landed hard, sparking louder applause from the crowd. Sonny's question was sharp, cutting straight to the core. But tariffs could spark a trade war. Other countries will retaliate, and Hollywood will lose its export markets. Have you considered that? Gibson nodded, acknowledging the point. I have, Sonny, but Hollywood isn't a helpless victim. We lead the world in cultural exports, 15 billion in American films sold abroad every year. Other countries might retaliate, but they need our films more than we need theirs. Tariffs are leverage for negotiation, not a wall for isolation. And if we invest in domestic production, Hollywood will be stronger, not weaker. His response was clear and logical, leaving the host momentarily speechless as the audience broke into applause, some even standing. Sensing the momentum shift, Goldberg tried to reclaim control. Mel, you sound convincing, but this is Trump's policy, and everyone knows he doesn't care about art. You're just doing his bidding, aren't you? Her question was a direct jab, meant to corner him. Gibson chuckled, not out of anger, but with the confidence of someone who saw the move coming. I'm not anyone's pawn, he replied calmly. I'm no errand boy, Whoopi. I'm a filmmaker, and I fight for my industry. If Trump pushes policies that protect American workers, I support them, not for him, but for the millions who depend on Hollywood. Call it what you want, the audience here knows the truth, Gibson said, gesturing toward the crowd. The studio erupted into cheers, the audience standing and clapping like thunder. Whoopi pursed her lips, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Behar and the other hosts exchanged glances. Realizing Gibson wasn't just holding his ground, he was steering the battle. A producer whispered through an earpiece, "Cut the shot! He's stealing the show!" But the cameras kept rolling, capturing Gibson, turning an attack into a sharp counterstrike. The energy in the studio buzzed with tension and excitement as the applause slowly faded, but the electricity lingered. Gibson sat upright, his gaze calm but piercing, like a fighter ready for the next round. Whoopi, though composed on the surface, gripped the table slightly, her eyes flashing with determination to reclaim control. She took a deep breath, her voice dropping to a grave tone. Mel, you talk a lot about jobs, but let's be real. You're one of Trump's most vocal supporters, a president many say is dividing America. Are you proud to stand behind him? Whoopi's question cut sharply, making the audience murmur with anticipation. Gibson tilted his head, his gaze steady, a faint smile hinting that he'd expected this move. I support anyone who puts Americans first, Whoopi. Trump's not perfect, but look at the results. Before the pandemic, U.S. unemployment hit a 50-year low, 3.5%. Black workers, women, and minorities had more stable jobs than ever. That's why I back his policies, not the man himself, he replied, his voice calm and grounded in data. The audience murmured, some nodding at the specifics. Goldberg, refusing to let him seize control, leaned forward, her voice sharpening. But politics isn't just numbers, Mel. Trump has fueled division, his speeches, his immigration policies. Don't you see that hurting the country, or are you just worried about your own wallet? Her question was pointed, intended to back him into a corner, drawing light applause from a few audience members. Gibson didn't flinch, his fingers lightly tapping the table as his eyes swept the audience before settling back on Goldberg. Division comes from both sides. Whoopi. I've traveled across America, from small towns in Ohio to big cities like Los Angeles. People don't want to argue about speeches. They want jobs, safety, and a future for their kids. If Trump delivers that, I support him, but I've criticized him when needed, like how he handles the media. I'm not blind. Gibson paused, his voice lowering. What about you? Have you ever wondered if this show fuels division by only inviting people who share your views? His question landed like a bomb, sparking cheers and laughter from the audience. A man in the back row stood up, clapping with fiery enthusiasm. Goldberg froze, lips pursed, clearly caught off guard. Joy Behar, quick to recover, jumped in. Oh, Mel, don't pretend to be neutral. You're Trump's guy, and everyone knows what he stands for. Conservative, outdated. You think the world's going back to your era, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, but with a flicker of worry in her eyes. Gibson chuckled confidently. Joy, I'm not trying to turn back time. I want an America where people are heard, not dictated to by the media or shows like this. I've been making films for over 40 years, and if I've learned one thing, it's that human stories, not politics, are what connect us. Trump, Biden, or anyone else. I only care about policies that help people live better, Gibson said, sincerely but firmly, sparking louder applause that rolled through the studio like crashing waves. Sensing the momentum shift, host spoke up calmly but sharply. Mel, you talk about listening to the people, but Trump is often criticized for ignoring minority communities. As someone with influence, don't you think you have a responsibility to speak out when he goes off course? The question was sharp, targeting Gibson's personal ethics, and the studio fell silent in anticipation. Gibson nodded respectfully. I do have that responsibility, Sonny, and I've acted on it. I've met Trump and called him out when I disagreed, like on how he handled some social issues, but I've also seen him invest in poor areas and boost job opportunities for minority communities. I'm not here to defend every choice he makes. I'm here to say we need to judge actions, not just words. His honest, logical answer made the host furrow her brow, unable to find a quick rebuttal. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, some cheering loudly, clearly moved by his candor. A woman in the middle row raised her hand in support, eyes shining, while Goldberg, feeling the crowd shift, tried to, Mel, you talk a good game, but you can't deny Trump has hurt many people. By standing with him, you're choosing a side. Don't you see how dangerous that is? Goldberg's question was sharp, aiming to corner Gibson. He met her gaze steadily. I'm not picking sides, Whoopi. I'm picking the truth. Every politician makes mistakes, but we can't let the media or shows like this decide who's right or wrong. This audience is smarter than that. They want the truth, not a scripted drama. His voice was low and powerful, drawing the crowd into his fight. Goldberg, took a deep breath, eyes flashing with renewed intensity, while Joy Behar leaned in with a sly look, and Sunny Hust adjusted her glasses, fingers poised to strike. Goldberg's tone dropped, deliberate and cutting. Mel, you talk about truth, but let's face another truth. Your past controversial statements, allegations of anti-Semitism and racism. How can the audience trust someone with that record to stand here defending American culture? The room gasped softly, all eyes on Gibson, waiting to see if he would falter or stand strong. Gibson paused, reflective, then looked directly at Goldberg, his voice low and steady, but heavy with conviction. I don't dodge my past, Whoopi. I've made mistakes, said wrong things, had moments I'm not proud of, but I've spent decades making amends, learning, and showing through my actions that I'm not the man of those mistakes. He paused, scanning the audience, inviting them to look deeper. I made films like Hacksaw Ridge, telling the story of a soldier who rejected violence and the passion of the Christ, honoring the faith of millions. That's who I am today. The room fell silent, some nodding with empathy. Goldberg, refusing to let him win sympathy, fired back. Words are easy, Mel, but your statements hurt people, Jewish communities, people of color. You really think a few films are enough to erase that? Her icy tone sparked murmurs and applause from some in the crowd. Gibson gave a faint, calm smile, not smug, but of someone weathered by storms. I'm not trying to erase my past, Whoopi. I face it. I've apologized publicly, met with community leaders, and worked to build bridges. But let's talk about responsibility. You've defended people with controversial statements, like when you spoke about free speech on this very show. So why don't I get a chance to make things right? His question landed like an arrow, striking at Goldberg's contradiction made her pause, her eyes flickering uncertainly as the audience erupted into applause, some cheering with eyes blazing. Bihar, sensing the shift, cut in with a mocking tone. Mel, don't dodge the issue. You said unacceptable things. Now you want us to clap because you've changed? The audience isn't that easily fooled. She crossed her arms, trying to pierce Gibson with her gaze. Gibson faced Bihar steadily. I'm not asking for applause, Joy. I want to be judged by my actions, not past mistakes. I've spent 40 years in this industry working with every race and religion, creating opportunities for thousands. If you want to dig up the good I've done too, like funding film projects for young Black directors in Atlanta, or do you just want to keep me in the villain box because it's easier to attack? His reply sigh was sharp and sincere, leaving Bihar silent and her eyes darting away. The applause roared again, louder like a crashing wave, and a woman in the front row stood, raising her hand in support, her eyes shining as if Gibson had spoken her truth. Poston, trying to steer things back, spoke calmly. Mel, I respect your efforts, but the audience needs consistency. How do they know you've truly changed, not just acting to save your reputation? Her question was smart, targeting Gibson's credibility and silencing the room. Gibson nodded, eyes sincere. Consistency isn't perfection, Sonny. It's getting up after every fall, doing what's right, and never stopping learning. I'm not acting. I live what I believe. If the audience wants to know who I am, they should look at my work, the people I've helped, and The stories I tell through my films, they'll see a man who faces his mistakes and always tries to do better. His response was like a vow, forcing the host to lower her head slightly, unable to find a flaw. The audience erupted in cheer, some standing with eyes gleaming. Sensing the crowd siding with Gibson, Goldberg tried to regain control. Mel, you talk about actions, but your past still casts a big shadow. Do you really think the audience will forget just because you tell a few touching stories? Her voice was accusatory but weaker than before, as if she was losing ground. Gibson met her gaze steadily. I'm not asking the audience to forget Whoopi. I'm asking them to see the whole me, mistakes, efforts, and what I've built. If you judge me only by my past, you deny everyone the right to change. I know this audience is smart enough to see beyond sensational headlines. The studio shook with cheers, the applause crashing like waves. Backstage, a producer shook their head, whispering through an earpiece, "He's running the whole show." Goldberg gripped her hands tightly, her eyes tense, while Bahar and the other hosts exchanged worried glances. Gibson's calm yet commanding presence had turned a personal attack into his advantage. Gibson responded with a powerful counterstrike that left the view reeling, still composed as he adjusted his collar, his eyes burning with relentless intensity. Goldberg's voice dropped low but cut sharp like a blade. Mel, you talk about change, but let's look at the bigger picture. You support Trump, who many say threatens free speech with his media attacks and lawsuits against the press. As a filmmaker, don't you see that as dangerous? The question hit like a cannonball, aimed at Gibson's ethics, the audience whispering softly, eyes fixed on him, waiting to see if he'd falter. Gibson tilted his head slightly, locking eyes with Goldberg, a spark flashing as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Free speech is the heart of America, Whoopi. I've seen it tested from Hollywood to politics. But let's be clear, if free speech isn't the right to say anything without consequences, it's the right to debate, challenge, and defend your views. I don't agree with everything Trump does, but a bigger threat is the media cherry-picking truths to serve their agenda. His voice was low, each word cutting through the silence, holding the audience captive. Goldberg furrowed her brow, voice sharper. Media cherry-picking? Mel, are you talking about us? The View is a place for debate and asking questions. Can't you handle being challenged? The aggressive question aimed to push Gibson on defense, drawing applause from some audience members. Gibson smiled subtly but sharply, like a swordsman ready for a decisive strike. I welcome a challenge, Whoopi, but what I see here isn't debate. It's a scripted setup to tear down anyone who disagrees with you. I've watched this show long enough to know conservative guests rarely get a fair shake. You call that free speech? He paused, sweeping his gaze over the audience, pulling them into the moment. I think the audience deserves to hear both sides, not just a pre-edited story. The crowd erupted in cheers, some standing, eyes blazing. Bihar couldn't stay silent, cutting in with a mocking tone. Mel, are you playing the victim now? We invited you here, gave you a chance to speak. If you can't take the heat, stay out of the kitchen. She crossed her arms, trying to pierce Gibson's resolve. Gibson turned to face her, eyes steady. Joy, I'm not afraid of the heat. I've made films through controversies, taken flack from all sides, and I'm still standing. But free speech isn't about inviting someone on just to turn them into a punching bag for laughs. Gibson signaled his team, and a large studio screen lit up, showing a sharply edited montage of The View attacking conservative guests. Interruptions, mockery, clips from past episodes. The audience was stunned, whispers rippling through the crowd. A woman in the back row covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. The montage ended with a clip of Goldberg asking, "What's free speech if we can't laugh in the face of wrong opinion?" Gibson looked straight at her, his voice low but firm. "Whoopi, if free speech means laughing in someone's face, then this show isn't a forum for debate, it's a stage for performance. The audience deserves better." The studio erupted, with cheers and applause, the crowd standing, some shouting Gibson's name, a man in the front row raising his fist, eyes blazing. For the first time, Goldberg looked flustered, gripping the table, her eyes wavering. Hust stepped in, calm but urgent. "Mel, you're attacking us, but free speech includes the right to criticize. Can't you accept that?" Her question was clever, but lost power before an audience leaning toward Gibson. He nodded respectfully, but replied steadily, "I accept criticism, Sonny, but criticism should. Fairness means being honest, not putting on a stage performance to tear down an opponent. I've made films long enough to know a good story needs every perspective, not just the director's. The View could tell a great story if you dared to let the audience decide instead of steering them." His words felt like a rallying cry, making the host lower her gaze, unable to find a flaw. The audience erupted again, cheers echoing, the stage lights pulsing with their heartbeat. Goldberg, sensing the fight slipping away, tried to regain control. "Mel, you talk about fairness, but you're defending a man who's called the media the enemy. Don't you see the contradiction?" Her voice trembled, as if this was her last chance. Gibson locked eyes with her, his voice low but commanding. "I'm not defending anyone's words, Whoopi. I'm defending the right to speak, to debate, to be heard. If the media or this show wants to be the gatekeeper of truth, then open the gate and let all ideas in. The audience doesn't need a guide. They need the truth. And I trust they're smart enough to find it." He pointed toward the audience, his voice ringing like a proclamation. The studio felt like it had just been shaken by an earthquake, the air still trembling after the fierce showdown over free speech. The audience stood, eyes sparkling, their cheers fading, but the echo lingering in every corner of the stage. Mel Gibson sat upright, his gaze calm, yet shining with a hint of pride, like a warrior who had just conquered his final foe. Whoopi Goldberg's hands lay limp on the table as she stared blankly, struggling to process what had just unfolded. Joy Behar, her silver hair slightly tousled, bit her lip, eyes distant. Sunny host, hand resting on crumpled notes, bowed her head like a lawyer who had just lost the biggest case of her career. In a last effort to regain control, Goldberg cleared her throat and forced a strained smile. "Thank you, Mel, for a lively conversation. Audience, what do you think of what you just heard?" Her voice was weak, lacking its usual spark, and the audience responded, not for her, but with a wave of applause for Gibson. A woman in the front row stood, cheering and raising her hand, eyes blazing, as if Gibson had spoken her own heart. The applause swelled into an unstoppable wave, forcing Goldberg to lower her head, her eyes betraying defeat. Gibson stood, adjusting his suit, his gaze sweeping the crowd with sincere gratitude. "Thank you for listening," he spoke in a low but warm tone, like a man who'd just completed a mission. "I didn't come here to argue, but to remind us all that we have the right to be heard and to speak. Keep seeking the truth." His words rang out like a declaration, sparking the audience into cheers once more, some shouting, "Mel! Mel!" as if he were their hero. Bahar, unable to hold back, jumped in with a mocking edge. "Oh, Mel, you sure know how to win a crowd, but we've still got more to say, don't we?" She forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed desperation, like an actor who'd forgotten her lines. Gibson simply nodded, eyes sharp. "Joy, I think the audience has said plenty," he replied, his voice gentle but cutting, drawing loud laughter and applause from the crowd. Host stepped in, trying to regain control with a calm, measured tone. "Mel, we respect your perspective, but The View is always a place for debate. We hope you'll come back to continue this conversation." Her words were polite, but her eyes revealed the tension of someone realizing the show had taken a heavy hit. Gibson smiled sincerely. "Sonny, if you're ready for a real debate, I'll be back, but next time, let the truth lead." His response hung in the air like an open invitation. The audience cheered, their eyes shining bright as Gibson stepped away from his chair, his stride steady and confident. His gaze swept the studio one last time, memories flooding back. Days when Hollywood had turned its back on him, long nights of self-reflection, and the hard road to reclaim himself. Today, he hadn't just defended his honor, he'd spoken for those drowned out by the media noise. As he left the stage, the applause crashed like waves, relentless until he vanished behind the curtain. From the back row, a man shouted, "Thank you, Mel!" The moment shook the entire studio. Backstage, chaos erupted. A producer, face flushed, yelled into a headset, "Who let that clip air? We're done for!" Another shook their head, muttering. Gibson turned the show into his stage. In the control room, screens flickered with flooding online comments, from "Mel Gibson destroyed the View" to "Whoopi's out of her league." Staff exchanged worried glances, realizing this episode was about to become a media storm. On stage, Goldberg sat silently, eyes vacant, trying to process the defeat. In her mind, she recalled when The View was untouchable, when she controlled every debate. But today, Gibson had shattered the script, forcing her to confront her own contradictions. Bihar's voice trembled as she whispered to host, "We underestimated him." The host nodded slowly, disappointment clear in her eyes as she folded her crumpled notes, an unspoken acceptance of defeat. The audience began filing out, but the buzz lingered. Near the exit, a group of young women animatedly discussed the show. "I've never seen anyone silence Whoopi like that," one said, her eyes shining. "Gibson's right. We need to hear both sides." Another nodded, scrolling through her phone to share the clip. In a quiet corner, an older man smiled proudly to his companion. "He didn't just win, he changed how I see the media." As the studio lights dimmed, the storm from Mel Gibson's showdown only grew, spreading like wildfire across social media. The audience left with phones in hand, fingers swiping to share the moments they'd witnessed. Outside, stepping onto the streets of New York, sunlight caught Gibson's face, his eyes calm, the look of a man who'd completed his mission. Meanwhile, at ABC's headquarters, chaos reigned like a ship caught in a storm. Minutes after the episode aired, social media erupted with millions of posts flooding with emotion. One user wrote, "Mel Gibson just turned The View to ashes. Who still calls him?" washed up, alongside the clip of Gibson's decisive moments. Another account with thousands of shares posted, Whoopi thought she'd take down Gibson, but he got the whole studio on its feet. Memes spread rapidly, images of Gibson captioned Truth 1, The View 0, and Goldberg looking flustered with When You Lose on Your Home Turf. Social media was swept up in the frenzy, the fallout from the unforgettable showdown just beginning. The frenzy exploded as reaction channels uploaded analysis, videos with titles like Gibson destroys the View in 5 minutes, racking up millions of views within hours. A young TikToker known for witty flair reenacted the moment Gibson aired the clip, adding explosive sound effects that had viewers laughing nonstop. Comments flooded in, I never liked Gibson, but now I'm a fan, and The View just shot itself in the foot. Some users even dug up old episodes of The View, highlighting times the show attacked conservative guests, reinforcing Gibson's argument. The press quickly jumped on the story. Reuters ran a piece titled Mel Gibson versus The View, a historic defeat for the talk show, analyzing Gibson didn't just win the debate, he exposed The View's bias, stripping away its shine. Fox News celebrated predictably with headlines like, Gibson teaches The View a lesson in free speech. Even neutral outlets like The Washington Post acknowledged the showdown marked a turning point, forcing media to rethink how they handle dissenting voices. Articles quoted Gibson's line, the audience deserves more than a scripted drama, which quickly became a viral rallying cry. At ABC, the boardroom turned into a battlefield. Executives with tense faces argued fiercely. A leaked internal memo to Deadline revealed panic. We underestimated Gibson. This is The View faced its biggest crisis in a decade as advertisers from cosmetics to food brands started pulling their contracts, fearing damage to their own reputations. A marketing director told Variety, the audience is turning on The View. We can't take the risk. Within 24 hours, the show lost 3 major sponsors, a devastating hit to its budget. Backstage, Goldberg, Bahar, and the host weathered their own storm. Usually confident, Goldberg locked herself in her room, refusing press inquiries. A close source revealed she felt betrayed by the audience and was questioning how the show handled Gibson. Bahar, ever outspoken, tweeted briefly, we just did our job. People need to calm down. But the post was flooded with thousands of comments accusing her of being a sore loser. Austin, usually reserved, stayed silent, but friends told Page Six she regretted not preparing better for Gibson. While The View sank into chaos, Gibson appeared at a Los Angeles event promoting his new film, greeted like a hero by thunderous applause and cheers. A fan held up a sign saying, Mel, thank you for speaking for us. Gibson smiled, but declined to comment. Directly on The View, his eyes said it all. He knew he'd won. In a brief Variety interview, he said, I didn't come to destroy anyone. I came to remind people that the truth is always worth fighting for. The quote quickly went viral, shared millions of times, and cementing Gibson's image as a symbol of resolve. On social media, the battle raged on. Gibson's fans launched a page called Mel Gibson, Truth Defender, gaining tens of thousands of members within hours, with posts dissecting every line he delivered on The View, from tariffs to free speech, spreading widely. Meanwhile, some View supporters tried to push back, claiming Gibson was just playing the victim. but their voices were quickly drowned out by the overwhelming wave of support for him. One post summed up the mood perfectly. Gibson didn't just beat The View, he made us question the media. As the day went on, the episode's impact became clear. Media analysts predicted that The View would need to revamp its format or risk losing viewers long-term. Loyal fans voiced disappointment. One Instagram user wrote, "I love The View, but they got it wrong this time. Yes, Gibson's right. We need both sides." Meanwhile, Gibson, calm and steady as ever, continued his journey, his new film gaining more attention than ever. Though the media storm from his showdown on The View eventually faded, its ripples spread far, like circles across a still lake, while social media and the press buzzed with analysis and debate. The View studio now sat silent, its lights dimmed like an empty arena after a fierce battle. Mel Gibson, back in Los Angeles, walked beneath the California sun, his eyes calm, the look of a man who had faced his greatest challenge and emerged victorious. But the legacy of that day wasn't his alone. It belonged to the millions who watched and started seeing the media with fresh eyes. At ABC, The View faced an uncertain future. High-level meetings dragged on as executives debated how to save the show. An internal report shared with Variety revealed a 15% drop in viewership the week after the episode, a blow that shook the remaining sponsors. The editorial team was forced to hold media ethics training, emphasizing respect for opposing viewpoints. While some loyal viewers stayed supportive, many took to Instagram to express disappointment. The View used to be where I found truth, but now it just wants to win. Once an icon of American talk shows, The View now stood at a crossroads: change or fade into obscurity. In the days that followed, Whoopi Goldberg retreated into silence. A close friend told People she spent hours reflecting and reading social media comments, trying to understand why the audience had turned away. Though she never publicly admitted defeat, she began considering this. The View began inviting more diverse guests, a small but meaningful shift. Joy Behar, known for her outspoken nature, continued defending the show on Twitter, though her tone softened, emphasizing dialogue over debate. Sunny Hostin, in a brief CNN interview, admitted, "We've learned the audience wants fairness, and we have to listen." These gradual changes showed that Gibson didn't just win a battle, he forced The View to confront itself. Meanwhile, Gibson carried on with remarkable calm. His new film, promoted during The View episode, became a focal point, with box office sales soaring thanks to the buzz from the showdown. Theaters filled not only with moviegoers, but with people supporting a man who dared to stand up. A Hollywood Reporter review noted, "Gibson doesn't just make films, he tells stories that challenge the status quo." The View became a vivid symbol in this struggle, and Gibson emerged as a figure for those feeling overwhelmed by the media, from small-town workers to independent Hollywood artists. Standing on his Malibu balcony, gazing at the Pacific, Gibson reflected on the days when he faced criticism and isolation in his search for meaning through his work. He knew that Day on the View wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reminder that truth, no matter how difficult, is always worth defending. A close friend shared in a Deadline interview, "Mel didn't come to destroy The View. He wanted to push them to do better, and I think he succeeded." The story of Gibson and The View didn't end with just one episode. It became a cultural touchstone studied in media classes and debated across online forums. Journalists coined the Gibson effect, highlighting how one person, armed with sincerity and sharp reasoning, could challenge a powerful media system. An NYU professor told the New York Times, Gibson reminded us that audiences aren't passive. They can shape the narrative if given the chance. As dusk settled over the View's now empty studio, its dim lights stood in stark contrast to Gibson standing on a Hollywood stage, greeted by roaring crowds. One side symbolized a fading empire, the other a burning flame of resolve. Gibson's legacy was more than a victory. It was a rallying cry for fairer media, for a world where truth isn't twisted by scripts. In the hearts of many, he remained the man who dared to stand up, not just for himself, but for all who believe in the power of their voice. The story of Mel Gibson's showdown on The View reflected the deep tensions in today's America, where political divides, media bias, and free speech battles fracture communities. In a landscape flooded with clashing social media opinions and media accused of shaping public sentiment, this episode serves as a sharp lens. Gibson, with his precise arguments on film, tariffs, politics, and owning his controversial past, especially his powerful free speech counterstrike exposing The View, challenged a powerful media system like few have before. The audience's roar, from cheers in the studio to Mel Gibson owns The View trending at #1 on social media, showed how much Americans crave fairness and transparency. ABC's crisis, with sponsors pulling out and ethics trainings underway, revealed growing pressure for media accountability. Gibson's journey, from confronting his mistakes to becoming a symbol of resolve, proves the power of truth in a society fractured by fake news and bias. The real-life lesson, when facing injustice or criticism, whether from colleagues, media, or public opinion, learn from Gibson, prepare thoroughly, face the truth head-on, and turn adversity into opportunity. Just as he acknowledged his past and backed it with actions, showing real change, you too can rebuild trust with sincerity. More importantly, as Gibson urged, seek truth, engage in debates with facts and respect, and don't let emotions rule. In a country that values free speech, use your voice like the audience that rallied behind Gibson, building bridges instead of walls. Hit subscribe to never miss dramatic stories like Mel Gibson's showdown with The View. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video exploring more game-changing media moments.